Now, what's the worst comment you've ever received on social media? Can you remember something? Okay, now, for me, as a content creator, let me show you something I got just a few weeks ago. Now, that's not even the worst, okay? It's just one of those things. And you would think that as an educational creator, someone who just wants to share anything and everything I know, trying to help people open up doors of opportunities for themselves, I wouldn't get comments like this, right? That's what you get for trying to do good. But even after a decade of creating content, one would think I no longer get hurt, right? But that's not true. I still get hurt. It's just the difference of getting hurt and choosing to keep going. And I no longer let these hateful comments stop. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. We're going to talk about critical thinking, or as I would like to call it, how to survive the comments section. Or, because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, and I will be relying heavily on stuff I experienced myself, let's reword that to how I survive the comment section. Okay? Now let's jump right into it. Now the first thing we're going to talk about is the importance of breathing. Can everyone take a quick breath with me? Let it out. Okay, all right, great. It's very important to learn how to temper your temper. Now let me show you another comment I received. Yeah, we're going to dig up some gold in all this dirt, okay? Now, this person right here, Janessa, managed to try to hurt me 3 different ways in one comment. It's actually quite fascinating if you think about it. She tried to attack my soji, my size, and my appearance all in one sentence. I didn't know if I would be upset, hurt, or actually quite impressed. Ang creative niya mag-insult, no? Yeah. And when I received this notification on my phone, 2 questions came to mind. The first was, hala, Lyqa, what did you do again? Huh? And the second question is, how could someone be this mad? And I don't recall knowing anyone named Janessa. Now, it took some time for me to settle down, breathe, before I tried to investigate why she was so mad at me. And I checked and found that her comment was actually written under a comment I wrote about a post made by a friend, a drag queen, who was announcing a show where they will put together all of the loudest, campiest drag performers on one stage. Now, I wrote that comment, obviously, because I found it funny, because it was ironic. Loud people being silent. I thought it was clear, right? But then that's how I learned that irony, sarcasm, satire, actually any joke in particular, is something that people struggle to understand offline and in person. And they even have a harder time, a more difficult time, figuring it out once it's online. Wala kasing me sa dulo. And that was how I understood na, okay, I should just let this one go. So, again, we should learn how to breathe. Now, I'll be the first to admit that on a particularly bad day, I could lash out. I'm not saying this because I'm perfect. In fact, I've done things, said things, typed things that I regret when I'm having a bad day. And I guess being on the receiving end of the worst days of other people gave me a different insight when it comes to this. And what saved me is really just a little bit of breathing skills. Okay? Just take a moment, step back, play with your dog, release some of those happy hormones, and then jump right in once you're ready. Now, temper is actually a really interesting word. And it's interesting because it's a word that has 2 meanings. Temper. Ano ibig sabihin yan? Pag-usapan natin in this new Learn with Lyqa live, I guess. Okay. Now, temper as a noun means strong emotions, usually negative. Imagine the Hulk, right? Or anger from the Disney movie. But when you turn temper, which is a noun, into a verb, when you verbify it, turn it into an action, it actually changes its meaning. It's no longer about strong emotion. It's actually about dampening, diluting, softening, something that's very strong. So when you temper your temper, you actually try to control it, to tone it down a little bit, and leave room for some sense to crawl back in. So that's the first point right here. You have to temper your temper. You have to breathe. Now, here's another thing I learned. The hard way, actually. You need to learn how to identify keywords when it comes to dealing with people online. Yeah. Identifying very important words. Because if you're not able to see these qualifiers, these little nuances, you could engage in some very interesting conversations online. Let me show you a conversation I had with Irvin. So basically what he's saying here is that I shouldn't have been a teacher who majors in social studies or social sciences. He's telling me that what I should have studied was values education. Now, for a bit of context, I had no choice in what major I would take up. It's just that all psychology graduates, if they're choosing to take up a secondary degree in education here in the Philippines, are required to take social studies as their major. So basically, I had no choice. PRC decision though. And I tried to communicate it to Irvin. I actually had it written on the post where he made his initial comment, and I also took some time to reply and explain. Okay? But he wasn't ready to let it go. So he pushed further by saying that he strongly believes that it's wrong and that I should have taken values education as major. Again, we're going in circles right here, right? Again, I stressed that I didn't have a choice. But now I was thinking, maybe it's not cutting across as clearly as it could or as it should. So let me pivot. Let me try to do something else. So I suggested that Irvin read up on how psychology is actually under the banner of social studies, along with other studies, kaya nga siya social studies plural, right? And his reply was actually fascinating because he replied with a challenge. First by saying that I was taking it too personally, not just personally, too personally. And that if I wasn't willing to let him speak his mind, I should just block him. This is quite weird, right? I think it's easier for him to do it the other way, but okay. And that, this is the interesting part. My suggestion was duly noted. Now, I replied saying that I was just, trying to make things clearer. This is the teacher in me, I think. I can't quit explaining things if I feel like the other person doesn't understand me. Does anyone do this too? But let me say this another way. Maybe it will make things clearer. But the sad part is, he actually replied with something I didn't expect. So he told me that my being a content creator means that I shouldn't take things personally, and that was what offended him. So my existence was what was offensive this time, no? And that I was the one taking it too personally. But actually, I learned something from Irvin with this comment. Maybe he's right. Maybe it's true. Maybe I'm taking things a little too personally. And I quickly figured out why. And it was because of this one word that kept, being there to lahat of comments. It's the word dapat. Yeah. Dapat, which in Filipino, which is in Filipino, but loosely translates into should. Now, dapat means something different, as should means something different sa could and would. So balik na naman tayo sa could, would, or should. Anong pinagkaiba dyan maliban sa spelling? Pag-usapan natin in this new learn mathematical life. But really quickly, what we can talk about here is that if could is about possibilities, right? Something that could happen. Would is more about your will or possibility for decision making, some sense of ownership. Should is different because it's prescriptive. When you say something should be like this, what you're saying isn't that this is one of the things that could be a good choice. What you're saying is that what I'm saying is the only choice. And everything else, everyone else is wrong. Right? If I tell you, well, this is something you could do, that is a suggestion. This is something I would do if I were in your place, that's also a suggestion, stronger one at that. But if I tell you this is what you should do, what does that mean? What you're doing is wrong. And this is the only way for you to succeed. And I think that's where the problem lies. So when it comes to online communication, it's very important for us to know or identify these keywords. Okay? Now, let's talk about how. None is different from some. Some is different from most. And most is not all. Now, you may think that's easy, that's simple, everyone knows that, but stay in the comment section for a few minutes and you'll quickly understand not everyone knows that. Can, will, and shall are different, as are should, would, and could. And if I could, I think this would help you. If you choose to, I think you should also remember this. Okay? Now, next thing. It's very important to account for context or emphasize empathy. Now, when we were kids, we were taught about context clues, right? But I think when it comes to online communication specifically, it's even more than that. You need to account for the person's context. Now, let me show you another comment I received. This is from Robert. Now, that translates into this. And whether you speak Filipino or English, you can sense how mad Robert was. All of that under a video where I talked about the difference between in and at. Like, it doesn't match, right? The level of hate. But then, as I was sitting there wondering what prompted this response, basically finding out what Robert's why was, he followed up with this comment. And it made everything clear. Now, this comment right here is one of the most painful comments I've read. But not because it hurt me, but because it brought to life a realization that's really rampant here in the Philippines. The sad part of life or our system of education is that so many people still believe that proficiency in the English language equates to intelligence, right? And the sad part is that also translates not just in a person's self-esteem, but in actual opportunities that they could get a hold of in life. You need to be proficient with English when it comes to your college exams. Some of you shared your own stories with me, your scholarship exams, your exams for work, for promotions and stuff like that. And the sad reality is that Robert probably sat in the classroom when he was a boy, maybe mispronounced a word, had everyone laugh at him, and then that started the spiral of unfortunate events where people would probably bring up the same mispronounced word to make fun of him, or sometimes when he would try to maybe say another English word, people would repeat it, right, in a funny tone. And that glued into his mind that, I'm not good at English, but let me prove that I'm better at you at everything else. So this comment was about me, but it was not just about me. For me, I was trying to help people have more opportunities in life. But to Robert in particular, I was not a stranger on the internet trying to help anyone who would click on one of my videos. To Robert, I represented all of the bullies, the people and the institutions that weighed down on his life, on his future. And so, this was his response. We've always heard how hurt people hurt people. This is just how it presents online. So again, we have to account for context. Now, the last part is this. You need to really focus on self-awareness. And I learned that through Kimberly. Yeah. Kimberly is a fascinating story because she actually spent a lot of time posting different comments like this across all platforms, claiming that I was a fraud and wondering out loud how someone who never got hired had the audacity to create a podcast called Get Hired. Now, what's interesting there is if she ever listened to any one of my podcast episodes, she would find how I talk about my actual experiences being on both sides of the table. Getting hired and hiring people, because I work as a hiring manager and I also lead my own company. I'm responsible for hiring all of my people, right? But she just kept doing this over and over again. Now, some of us may be familiar with the term clout chasing, right? But there's something that you may not be familiar with. It's called clout baiting. And clout baiting is basically people trying to go after people who already have a following. Meron na pala akong following kaya. But what they do is they try to get a reaction out of you to maybe funnel some of your clout. So they're really banking, literally and figuratively, on getting a rise out of you, so you would react, and then this will start a cycle of interactions. Now, I was really hurt by some of Kimberly's claims. And I was typing a really long-worded response, but my friend told me, you should stop doing that, because you shouldn't listen to her. Think about who you truly are, who we see you, who we see you as. And more than that, all of the real people, all of these comments, these good news from people, some of you I've met personally here today. These are the type of people that you get with. So again, just remember to breathe, identify those keywords, account for context, and seek self-awareness. That will be your protection when it comes to communicating with people online. And yes, that spells out bias, because we all have that, and we need to acknowledge it before we address it. Okay? So, in a world where everyone is critic, remember to critique all so that we can develop critic all thinking. And that is how you survive online. Thank you so much.